Most of us are trying to build the lives of our dreams. We're trying to create meaningful work, build good relationships, become healthier, wiser, more capable versions of ourselves, and to contribute something valuable to the world. But fear gets in the way, and it's often the greatest impediment between who we are today and who we could become. Now, great literature gives us wonderful insights into fear in its various manifestations, and it acts as a sort of laboratory in which we can examine these fears from the safety of our own home. So today I want to take a look at 7 books that explore different dimensions of fear and help us better understand one of the most powerful forces that shapes the course of our lives. Now, no discussion on the power of fear in literature would be complete without looking at Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky. The fear that he explores here is really guilt, but it's much more complicated than that. At the very beginning of the novel, Dostoevsky's main character, Raskolnikov, commits a crime, an egregious crime. And he believes that due to this intelligence and rationality he possesses, he can escape its consequences. But he's dead wrong. What follows is one of the greatest psychological studies on the wrestling between good and evil, right and wrong, that's ever been explored in literature. But we often fail to recognize that all of these actions are really driven by this deep-set fear, or really a meta-fear, a fear of fear itself on the part of Raskolnikov. And it's not fear of being caught that he has to wrestle with. It's a fear of himself, a fear of what he has become, what he's capable of, a psychological fear. That's why we call Dostoevsky the psychologist. Now, this is an insidious fear, one that we must explore in our survey of fear in literature. It's a fear that no matter how cleverly we justify our actions, part of us still knows the truth. Whenever we commit a moral crime, even a small one, even if no one else could know, we know. Now, nobody comes close to Dostoevsky in this form of exploration, except perhaps the final book on this list, but we'll get there in a bit. He's really adept at kind of looking at how guilt can become a worse prison than even a jail cell could be. We fear external consequences more often, but Crime and Punishment suggests that really the deeper fear should be the internal ones that we can't ultimately escape. So that's number 1, Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky. And a second major fear that literature gives us great insight to is the fear of the unknown. This is one of the most haunting explorations of the power of the unknown aspects of nature. It can be experienced through At the Mountains of Madness by Lovecraft. I think what makes H.P. Lovecraft's writing so eerie is that most works of horror or sublime literature that explore the unknown, or the fear of the unknown, they do so at least with the safe notion that although it might as yet be unknown, it can be known. This is important as we human beings naturally want to make sense of the world, and if it doesn't make sense at all, Lovecraft doesn't afford us that luxury. For him, the fear is that the evil is unknowable ultimately. This is an attack on our sense of grounding in the world. We want to believe that reality is understandable and our place within it is meaningful, but Lovecraft doesn't care. He presents that fear unadulterated for us to confront alone. And At the Mountains of Madness, explorers venture into Antarctica, and they uncover truths that challenge humanity's understanding of itself. I think this is a fear many of us experience whenever we encounter uncertainty, but we often comfort ourselves with the knowledge that, we will figure it out. Whenever we step into a new career, a new relationship, or an unfamiliar chapter in life, the unknown is frightening because it threatens our illusion of control. This is really, really a great work to read if you want to explore the fear at its deepest level of the profound unknown, the truly unknowable. Now, a third form of fear can be found in a very classic story, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. This is one of the most famous and foundational stories in the Arthurian legend sphere, and it's definitely worth reading for that reason alone, but it is also a fascinating exploration into the fear of failure as understood as a combination between fear of death and fear of not succeeding. At first glance, the medieval poem might seem like kind of a weird choice here, but like many poems in that era, it really is fundamentally about courage. And what is there to be courageous about? Against the prospect of death, right? That's the key here. In this narrative, Sir Gawain accepts this challenge that appears to guarantee his death in a year. And over the course of the story, he must confront the possibility that he will not survive. Yet the deeper conflict isn't that physical death, it's the moral failure that he could find on the journey, along the way. It's that fear of discovering that he is not as noble or virtuous or courageous as he imagined himself to be. And this is very relevant for us as well. Many people can tolerate hardship and challenge, but they can't tolerate seeing their self-image shattered. Sir Gawain teaches us that the courage, it doesn't need to be in the absence of fear. It's not acting honorably despite the fear. That's really what courage is. Honestly, this is a pretty great virtue ethics message as well. Now, the fourth book on this list is another great one. We turn to the familiar regret of Fear of Regret. This is one of the great novels on regret, but there's so many. And when I was reflecting, the first one that came to mind was The Remains of the Day by Kazuo Ishiguro. The Remains of the Day is a brilliant novel. Ishiguro is one of my favorite contemporary novelists. I really look up to him as an artist. But this novel is simply one of the best explorations of regret. It follows Stevens, who's an aging butler who devoted his life to duty and professionalism and service. And the question is, as he reflects on his past, how much did he sacrifice? What exactly was he serving, and was it worth it in the end? And what makes this novel devastating is that there are no major fears like monsters, crimes, or dramatic disasters. The disquieting realization that one's life has slipped away and that the remains of one's days are not so long, as it were, is a terrifying fear I think most of us can relate to on one degree or another. The fear of taking risks, which is understandable, but Ishiguro wants to suggest that perhaps the greater fear, the greater danger, is never taking risks in the first place. Now the question here is, what if the greatest fear should be reaching the end of one's life and realizing that one never really lived? It's a really sobering thought, and The Remains of the Day is a great book. Now the next one is one I've spoken about before, The Trial by Franz Kafka. The fear explored here is really helplessness, and also the terrifying tyranny of bureaucracy, but we explored that in a previous video. So for today, let's focus on the fear of helplessness, because this is an important one. When Joseph K. was arrested and prosecuted by this system that offers no explanations of the charges, of the rules, the way out, we're really confronted with a very scary, absurdist fear of lack of agency amid these large moving systems. I think in this way, the novel kind of captures this really unique modern fear. The fear that like these powerful systems, bureaucracy, institutions, social pressures, they kind of operate according to abstruse rules that we can never fully understand. The trial is really the great nightmare of powerlessness. And much of Kafka's other work also explores these themes. Metamorphosis is another great one in this kind of era. But in the end, Kafka reminds us how much anxiety can come from uncertainty, lack of agency. And this is another fear that we really think have to ponder. And the second to last book on our list here explores the fear of loss, which is, of course, something everyone can relate to. This one is The Road by Cormac McCarthy. There are many fear of loss books, but this one follows father and a son as they travel through a devastated world after an unspecified catastrophe. This genre, post-apocalyptic, really does a great job of showing loss, everything we take for granted, and there are many other great entries on this list that we could also include as well, like Alas Babylon. But I like this book because it's just unapologetic and bleak. It explores what life would be like when everything familiar disappears. What do things look like when civilization is gone, when security is gone, when comfort is gone, and what remains at the end of that. But the novel is ultimately not about apocalypses. We aren't even really told anything about the disaster. Like many great books, this one's really about love. And what I mean by that is not love between a man and a woman, but between a father and a son. The love of a man who has known loss for the last meaningful thing that remains with him. That's the kind of love. And of course, whenever we love something deeply, we fear losing it. And this is another fear we must confront with the aid of great literature. And The Road is a bleak but ultimately meaningful guide to explore this. This is because The Road reveals a profound truth. The thing most worth having in life is the thing that makes us vulnerable. Love and fear are often inseparable, but there is a healthy fear and an unhealthy one, so we must learn to channel our fear of losing things we love into healthy ways of protecting them and enjoying them and letting them flourish. But speaking of healthy and unhealthy relationships, the seventh and final look on our list here is one of the greatest works in English literature. One that I've personally mentioned many times and been moved by in new and enriching ways every single time I revisit it. Hamlet by William Shakespeare. Brilliantly, almost incomprehensibly so, this explores the fear of choice and action Really, one of the most ancient enemies to human flourishing and human potential is indecision. And Hamlet's journey is not so much trying to figure out what he should do when he learns about a terrible truth from the past. Truthfully, he pretty much knows what he believes he should do right away. Hamlet's journey is pacing on the treadmill of overthinking, right? He's continually hesitating. He thinks, he analyzes, questions, reflects, he delays, he doesn't move forward. It's the primordial example of analysis paralysis. He's brilliant, but he cannot get out of his head enough to make good and wise decisions. Now, many intelligent people do suffer from this form of fear, I think. Is this the right action? Should I do this? Should I do that? Should I do the other thing? Perhaps this instead? It's not the fear, it's not that we fear action itself, right? It's the fear of making the wrong choice, I think. And so that fear becomes transmuted and disguised as intellectualizing deep thought, but really it's just fear. And perhaps the fear is really all these other fears combined as well, right? The fear of the unknown, the fear of loss, the fear of helplessness, of death and courage, the fear of lost time, the fear of uncertainty, the fear of one's conscience. These are all kind of subsumed into Shakespeare, into this fear. Shakespeare almost really superhumanly contains the insights of all these forms of fear in the overactive mind of the Prince of Denmark. But Hamlet reminds us that endless analysis can be its own prison, like Dostoevsky, like I mentioned earlier. And that is something, the fear of making a mistake becomes greater, I think, than the mistake itself. And it actually is worse to be overthinking than to just take the wrong action. But what I love about these works from literature is that they reveal fear from completely different angles. Together, they suggest that fear is not merely an obstacle, but one of the central realities of our experience as humans. The goal is not to eliminate the fear, but to understand it, because the fears we understand are the fears that we are able to confront. And the fears that we can confront are the ones that no longer control our actions and control our lives. So, in conclusion, I'd love to know what book has really taught you the most about fear. Let me know in the comments, and if you're enjoying these videos, or if you enjoy videos exploring literature, philosophy, psychology, and the ideas that help us live better lives, give this video a like and consider subscribing. And thank you to all my channel members for your gracious support. You guys really are amazing, and I couldn't do this without you. And shout out to our founding members especially. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you to everyone who is joining our book club as well. I'm really excited to see how many people are interested in deeper looks into books and deep dives. And it's not too late to join, by the way, our June book club. You can find out all the information by subscribing to Substack. The link is in the bio. But it's going to be really amazing, and I'm excited to explore these books along with you. And thank you all for watching. I'll see you in the next one.